Thank you for joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. We have an intimate group here so far, but I am very, very excited to hear from Christine Anonuevo and Jennifer Wickham. And I appreciate all of you tuning in. I am just going to give it another, 15, 20 seconds before I get going. We missed at least one session. I'm trying to remember. We have in fact missed two, but it's been a second since we've gathered, and so I'm excited to have us live again here. And I'll go ahead and just start introducing our session tonight. So my name is Nick Brewer. I'm the Administrative Director at the League of Canadian Poets. And you have tuned in to Cross-Pollinations, the Canadian Association for Health Humanities Virtual Rounds series. And that's sponsored by us, the League of Canadian Poets, as well as by the Canadian Association for Health Humanities and the Health Arts Research Centre. And I have just a little bit of a few announcements here. I would like to read this land acknowledgement to you. This is the land acknowledgement for the League of Canadian Poets, which is situated in Toronto, upon the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Métis. The treaty that was assigned for this particular set of lands is collectively referred to as the Toronto Purchase and applies to the lands east of Brown's Line to Woodbine Avenue and north towards Newmarket. The League of Canadian Poets recognizes the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land, and we also recognize that art, poetry, and poetic practice related to the work of our organization takes place in traditional territories of many different nations. For instance, today, very few of you are tuning in from Toronto, if any, so I do encourage you to certainly share the land acknowledgement for where you are. But also, if you have a resource that you would like to share, whether that's a local organization doing work that you really admire with Indigenous populations in your area, or a book or poem or piece of art by an Indigenous creator, I would encourage you to share that in the chat if you can. That would be lovely. And I am actually tuning in from Kitchener, which is on the Haldimand Tract, which is also the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, as well as of the neutral peoples, which are people who are no longer around due to the genocide committed by the Canadian government. And I'm just going to read this slide to you. Each presenter has been given instructions about the conflict of interest form prior to their proposed session date. Included in this package are instructions on how to mitigate bias in their presentations. For instance, if there is any reference to specific medications in their presentations, to use generic names. Through this process, we endeavor to prevent any perceived or real conflicts of interest. However, if any conflicts of interest become apparent during the session, please alert the session host, myself, via the Zoom chat, and I will intervene. You'll also have an opportunity to provide feedback on this session afterwards. And just to let you know, this session is being recorded and it will be distributed to all registrants following this event. So that is certainly enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter, Christine Anonuevo. I lied a little bit. It's not all I'm going to say because I am going to read Christine's biography here. Christine Anonuevo is a non-Indigenous settler of color who was born and raised in what is known as the Okanagan Valley. She is the daughter of diasporic Philippine. I am not sure how to pronounce the gender-neutral spelling of Filipino, Filipina, parents from the provinces of Pangasinan, Quezon, and Batangas. She is a PhD student in health sciences at the University of British Columbia on Ladley Tene territory. She maintains an interdisciplinary artistic practice that explores the limits of Filipinx diasporic belonging in rural places. She lives with her Kitsan Wet'suwet'en family on Liltspook territory, where she continues learning with bees, baby chickens, and many plant ancestors. And I also would just like to apologize that I did not adequately prepare for reading your bio, so I apologize for that. Please do feel free to correct pronunciations. And thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Nick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you to the Canadian League of Poets for the invitation to participate in the Cross-Pollination series. I am at the beginning of my research project, which is tentatively titled Ang Kwento Natin ay Ating Paghilom. Our stories are our healing. At the heart of this project is my motivation to elevate the voices, wisdom, and stories of Black, Indigenous, Filipinx, Asian, and other racialized women and their embodiments of health and well-being in specific Northern geographies. Additionally, I would like these diverse groups of women and their stories to be in dialogue with one another about their health in rural, remote, Indigenous, and Northern communities. I would like to thank the Kwento Nation, upon which the University of Northern British Columbia is located, the Health Arts Research Center, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, my supervisor, who's on the call, Dr. Sarah DeLeo, and my committee, Sandra Martin-Harris, Dr. Rita Wong, and Dr. May Morales, for their ongoing support and encouragement. And thank you, maraming salamat po, to Jennifer Wickham for agreeing to share some of her powerful poetry alongside me this afternoon. So I would like to thank the Gitxsan Nation, where I'm presenting from today, where I live with my family. Specifically, I live on Wilkes-Spoke territory, and my partner, Gusi Wilaxet, he who teaches, is a member of this house group. I am reminded every day by my partner, family, the land, and all of its micro ecosystems of the iterative dance of learning, unlearning, relearning, and co-learning how to be in good relations with those around me. So in this presentation, I will briefly be highlighting some condensed points from the research proposal that is currently awaiting approval from the Research Ethics Board at UNBC. So I will begin by taking a moment to welcome and make space for my ancestors. I was in so-called Vancouver last month for a celebration of life for my great uncle's wife, who lived to be 98 years old. I was reminded of the relationships that I have with those across time, space, and global geographies. I acknowledge the privilege I have as a cisgendered, able-bodied, heterosexual woman with university-level education, and the sacrifices my ancestors made in order for me to be here today. I'm thinking about my late Lola, who was born in 1913 in the province of Quezon, just before World War I, and how she survived World War II, Japanese occupation, and migration to so-called Canada. And I'm thinking of my father, who was born in 1946 under these conditions, and who came to so-called Canada, fleeing martial law in the 1970s. I give thanks to my mother, who's in her 80s and from the province of Pangasinan, who was born during World War II and whose own mother became an ancestor when she was only 16 years old. My mother came to so-called Canada in the 1960s by herself, and she believed she was one of the first diasporic Filipinas in so-called Penticton on Silks and Okanagan territories, and she was befriended by women from the Penticton Indian Band Reserve. So next month, on July 12th, my parents will celebrate their 47th wedding anniversary in the Okanagan. I'm also thinking of my relatives who are still in the so-called Philippines, who are subject to ongoing intergenerational dictatorships and climate crises. So I owe the privilege of where I am today to my family who survived the conditions that brought them to these lands. With that privilege comes responsibility. So my hope is that my research project contributes to highlighting and materially addressing the ongoing conditions that give rise to large numbers of Filipinx in the diaspora and in northern geographies. My previous graduate research was anchored in critical narrative inquiry. I explored how Filipinx in the diaspora engage with Indigenous peoples while attending to the colonial nature of residing on unceded and ancestral territories. I hoped that such an awareness had the potential to transform systemic racism and settler colonialism. So I'm motivated to document stories related to racialized women and their health, and because I believe these stories are largely absent from mainstream academia, and arguably these stories are largely invisible from mainstream audiences. So stories are our lifeblood, our inheritance, and our futurity. The proposed stories in this PhD project provide a space for Black, Indigenous, and racialized women to consider their health and bodies and the conditions that contribute to or negate their health and well-being. The project also provides a space for women to discuss their bodily sovereignty. So my research revolves around two questions. What are the land, water, air, health, and body stories of women of color in Northern geographies? And how do these stories offer insights about local, provincial, national, and global conversations about Indigenous self-determination? And so by focusing solely on racialized women in specific Northern geographies, I hope to break narrative dualisms that are taken for granted, such as the white settler Indigenous binary. By using the term woman, womxn, for example, this allows space for the fluidity of gender and sexuality rather than the binary of male and female. So I'm thinking about stories that are related to racialization and how white settler colonialism and imperialism have interrupted ancestral connections to land, water, and air populations, and how those interruptions have impacted and continue to impact the health and well-being of racialized women. So I have 4 objectives: to document racialized women's stories as a means of colonial unknowing. Such stories act as counter-knowledge to mainstream narratives that pathologize racialized women with a monolithic story of being damaged, deficit-oriented, and as statistics representative of high rates of disease and unwellness. To contribute evidence that documents stories of racism in racialized women's lives as they relate to industrial projects. To document how racialized women and their stories embody, resist, or perpetuate colonial governmental policies. And finally, to reference existing creative writing by women of color that resists oppression in all its forms. So my literature review covered 4 broad areas. The first area included critical legal and ethno-ecological geographies. I wanted to center the Indigenous value that being on the land can be transformational for one's health and well-being. Because of my lived and embodied realities, I've witnessed stories of the laws and lands that I'm writing about in my research, including Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan laws, some of which have been documented by non-Indigenous settlers such as Antonia Mills and Melanie Moran, to name a few. As a lifelong learner, educator, witness, and mother, I share information related to these laws not as an authority. Authority for such laws lies with the hereditary chiefs, who are accountable to their house members. I give thanks and gratitude to the many Gitxsan, Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, elders, knowledge keepers, artists, educators, writers, poets, as well as Métis and Inuit people who have gifted me with their stories, gifts, laughter, and healing knowledge that I carry with me as a responsibility to be in good relation with others, especially the rights and title holders of the territories. And further, I hope to delve deeper into understanding connections between self-determination of Indigenous peoples both here, where I live, and in the so-called Philippines. I have witnessed in these specific northern geographies that such laws establish principles that govern human relations and relations between humans and the land, the animals, the plants and trees, water, and the spirit world. I am interested in how ethno-ecological and critical legal understanding can contribute to women's health in the geographies where I live and raise a family. For this project, ethnoecology links humans, more than human beings, land, water, and air as interconnected relatives. This research seeks to elevate the voices of Indigenous, Black, and racialized women who take up leadership and care for community members through land-based practices of wellness, healing, governance, and resurgence. So the second area of my literature and background review included the distal or structural determinants of health. And here I'm thinking about institutions, economies, policies, social interactions, knowledge, and leadership that are steeped in colonial ways of knowing and being, and which I argue are the root causes of health inequities for racialized populations. I then reviewed multiscalar racism, which includes environmental racism, white settler colonialism, racial capitalism, and some frameworks of reconciliation as ways through which the settler state controls land and labor to ensure ongoing racial hierarchies of dominance, and as ways that continue patterns that lack free, prior, and informed consent of rights and title holders. Finally, I look at the creative writing of Black, Indigenous, and Asian women writers for examples of long-term relationality and solidarity, gesturing towards Indigenous self-determination, land-based practices, and Indigenous resurgence and governance. So my methodological orientations are responses that resist dominant ideologies that center patriarchal and Euro-American ways of knowing and being that thrive on colonialism and capitalism. Critical race theory is a framework and praxis that aims to transform relationships of power, race, and racism. It also validates the experiential knowledge of communities of color as evidence of the naturalization of the unconscious bias of whiteness and white supremacy found in many institutions. Intersectional feminism is germane to my research as it centers the voices of those experiencing concurrent and overlapping forms of oppression. Finally, decolonizing methodologies are an approach that privilege storytelling and counter-stories and fundamentally disrupts Western colonial ways of research and extraction to foster research that is enabling and empowering, relational, and generative. So for my methods, I aim to incorporate storytelling and counter-stories. Listening and documenting stories is fundamentally an arts-based research method. So I will invite women who choose to be part of this project to be co-researchers. After documenting their stories, I will be guided and directed by the other women on how we will present and to whom we will present these stories as a collective whole. Finally, through co-creation and collaboration, additional hybrid artistic works that center around these stories will be created. And so I would like to conclude my presentation with 3 poems, because I would like for us to move from our heads to our hearts, as sometimes academic and health science endeavors can focus only on intellectual or biomedical articulations, rather than heart-centered, felt, and intuitive orientations. Poetry and geopoetics may also be a mode of sharing and creating place-specific knowledge. So by engaging with this particular form of poetic expression, I aim to contribute to the cultural foundations of my own kinship relatives from Northern geographies. I will read 3 short poems by Filipinx poet Carla Comanda. Each poem uses a distinctly Filipino form of poetry called the tanaga. This form of poetry has its origins in 16th century oral Tagalog traditions. Okay, so the first poem, I'm just going to move myself over here. Today I heard the corals crawl, calling for food. So the sea witches warmed them up with funeral fluff made of sunlight. I gossiped with whales while scraping through grease, their voices shaved by tongues. Soon we'll walk on water, on bamboo stilts, held together by crocodiles, eating from our mouths. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. And my contact information is here. It's my last name, Anonuevo, @unbc.ca.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was so interesting, and I am very excited to see where this research takes you, and hopefully look forward to hearing more about it. Although I know research in academia can take a long time, so I've got patience. And thank you for finishing up with those 3 beautiful poems. It takes us right into the second portion of our evening, which will be a presentation from Jennifer Wickham. I'm going to quickly read Jennifer's bio now. And I will preemptively apologize for my pronunciation and again invite Jennifer to correct me. And I apologize, I didn't do this beforehand. I'm not sure where my brain went. So Jennifer Wickham is a member of Kasik Grizzly Bear House in the Giditnten Bear Wolf clan of the Wet'suwet'en people. She is currently living in Gidimt'en Yinta in what is now known as Northern British Columbia. Jennifer has been the media coordinator for 3.5 years and is currently co-producing and co-directing the documentary film Yinta about the Wet'suwet'en fight for sovereignty. Sovereignty. That's just an English word that I don't know how to say. She loves to bead and spend time with family. She dreams of freedom for her people and bright, shiny futures for all the young people. She is a poet and has written and published a book of poetry called I'm a Real Skin. And her internet was a little touch and go, so I'm not sure. She may have her video off here. I am going to, oh, there we go. Lovely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you for everyone so that we can all see you. And thank you for being here.
Great. Hadi Sai Jennifer Wickham Sydney Gidimden Hasley Wet'suwet'enis, and can you all hear me okay? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, great. If I do start to lag at all, I would just maybe ask folks to turn off their cameras. I'm not sure if that will help me on this end at all. But I just want to say Tabi Masai to the organizers and to Christine for inviting me. I'm going to share some poetry from my book, and almost all of it is about my territory, the history of my people, and our current fight for our sovereignty. So I'm gonna just jump right in. The first poem is titled Ingasai Wudzinqua. Ingasai in my language means I love you, and Wudzinqua is the name of the river that we are currently fighting to protect from the Coastal GasLink pipeline. And I wrote this after meeting Wudzinqua for the first time in 2012. Ingasai Wudzinqua. She is my healer, a consoling friend, a life giver, a grandmother. She heard the songs and touched the skin of the original Wet'suwet'en, sacred knowledge. But we forgot. We try to listen with our ears. Time has made us deaf to her. There's too much background noise. The smog is in our souls. Shh. Can you hear her cry for you? I need a job. I need a new car. I just bought a new eco-friendly traveler mug from fill in the blank. It's funny, right? The love of my life is not my cell phone, a flat screen TV, or my shoes. Ingasai Witzinkwa. I don't need to tell you how beautiful she is, how her clear blue-green sparkles in the sun, or how her glacial currents take your breath away and jumpstarts your soul and every cell in your body. How her voice sings you alive. This isn't that kind of love poem. Let's get back to listening. What are the names of your rivers? Can you hear them? Let's resurrect those words together. All our words, all at once. I want to feel all those hard and soft sounds hitting me at the same time. Just let me absorb the words of our ancestors. Like Witzinkwa. But I'm not a river. I am a Wet'suwet'en woman, and my purpose is clear. Like ancient protocol and boundaries, I'll show you where the line is. We were born her guardians. Warriors watch over Witzinkwa. So I almost quit my undergrad immediately after meeting her. But my family talked me out of it and said, the fight will still be here, Jen. So I stayed in Victoria. And shortly after that, then Prime Minister made an apology to residential school survivors. And while I was in school, I was taking this poetry class and learning all different forms of poetry. And I can't remember for the life of me, someone else on here probably knows better, the form of poem that Flanders Fields is written in. Maybe drop it in the chat if you know. But I decided to write one in that form, and it's called, sorry. Kill the Indian in the child. So they tried. And through the years, so many children died in unmarked graves, dug by hands of others, severed from the womb of all their mothers. Tuberculosis, they said. People lied. Or people laid down their peace pipes and cried. Still, the truth of the mission was denied. Sleepless, haunted, waiting under covers, hearing kill the Indian in the child. And now we search history without a guide. Standing tall, here we are. We will not hide. Doctors, lawyers, so many others. We stand united. I call you brothers. Warriors, keeping the child alive inside. Kill the Indian and the child. They tried. Sorry, wow. I haven't read that one in a while. And since they've started searching all the grounds of all the former residential schools. But yeah, after the apology, I was pretty pissed off, so I wrote a follow-up. It's called Sorry is a Four-Letter Word. Sorry is a four-letter word. I've heard that to say sorry means you didn't mean to do it. So tell my family it was a mistake. You use words like regret and recognize as if it means anything to say, I apologize. I know that trick. You aren't the first man to dodge, duck, and dive, hide in all the seemingly remorseful words of someone caught with their pants down. You saved that 4-letter word for the end as a climax, but we know this song and dance, the whining and dining after jealous rage, the back of your hand. This is just roses the morning after. A length of silk sure looks inviting, but it never lasts. Just long enough to shut us up and keep us from running or fighting back. Say any word enough times and it loses meaning. I want my grandchildren to know new words, words with depth and weight. Our babies cut their teeth on your 4-letter words these days, but they're still hungry. Because even as I command your language, I lead no one. Power words passed down since time immemorial come from the land. So tell me, when's the last time the land apologized? So while I was going to university in Victoria, there was this really beautiful elder on campus, and she always opened all of our events with a prayer and a song. And I always loved hearing her speak, and she was so gentle and so sweet. And then one time she was opening an event, I think it was a drum making workshop or something, and she was talking about how she always thought that she couldn't sing. And so I wrote down, all our people have beautiful voices, and that's the name of this next poem. Calling in our ancestors, power words, gifts from the land, words, songs, prayers, choked out of our children, every last morsel stolen from hungry mouths, until nothing was left. Throat sounds, tongue sounds, heart and hand sounds, hushed water sounds, crying and howling savage sounds. Keep them coming, I beg you. Every time a woman sings, I cry for the thousands that are silent. Push past your preconceived ideas of what a singer is. Let it out. Be the record keeper, whistleblower, the truth. Unlock every secret that's been stuck like a dark, heavy sphere of granite. With sound, with love, with light. Push out those pretty sounds you hide. I just have a couple more. I'm not sure where everyone's at in so-called Canada, or how many of you are aware of our current fight in Wet'suwet'en territory right now. Can I get a thumbs up reaction if folks have heard of Gitumden Checkpoint? Okay, so I wrote this next one after my sister Slato was arrested for the first time in 2019. And it is called What If I Told You? What if I told you that we are the land and the land is us is not a metaphor? Our DNA is in the trees. And even if we leave our bodies more in this place, we've been torn and uprooted, scattered and broken, but we are still here. What if I told you that Canada wants to kill us? Not just our Indigenousness, our ceremonies and languages, our stories, laws, and songs. They want us in the ground because our spirits are too strong and they've been trying to steal our land for too long. We've had enough. And when we stand up, rise up, war cry with our fucking fists up, it's time to throw down with the crown. They send the army in because that's the only way they think they can win. And what if I told you that they moved in not knowing that my 3-year-old niece had been moved out because they don't care about our children? Skyze yet tohies, our future matriarch. One more with Suidin bottoming out their bottom line. She is unbreakable, just like her mother and her mother and her mother. Her bloodline is the mountains, rivers, and trees. All the answer to our ancestors' prayers. And what if you believed me? So one of the things that my relative Frida often talks about is how one of the reasons why she fights so hard is that she doesn't want to be telling her grandchildren one day what salmon used to taste like. And this next poem is dedicated to what our people used to depend on, which is the caribou. It's called My Soft Heart Herds. My ancestors ate caribou, and yet there is no one in my family to tell me what they taste like. Alcan drowned what was left after the CN Railway cut them off. I mourn them often, full chest heaving, painful sobs like I'm being crushed by the loss. But when I talk about them, my words just dissipate. Maybe it's too painful, like admitting that we've lost something so sacred makes it real. And we all turn to elk and moose to fill our plate in silence. I feel it all. And it's a joke that I cry about everything, but I can't hold it anymore. The pain of the land and the water is too loud to ignore. They're in my bones, and the strength in my DNA fed from millennia of these beautiful beasts, and the land that sustained them fuels my resistance. I wear their memory as a shield, protecting whatever it is we have left and shaking the rest of you awake. I'll show you every day, even when you hate me. Our survival depends on it. I have one last poem to read and share with you guys. And it's dedicated to my son, Samson. I wrote it, I think, when he was 8 or 9. Maybe younger. Anyway, he's turning 20 next month. And I read it to him every couple of years and remind him how much I love him. And it's called My Greatest Accomplishment Is You. I would die for. The boy that keeps the spirit world laughing. You are the one that can see through Sasquatch eyes, the example for future men. You carry the world in your heart, not on your shoulders. And for you, I will do anything. I will move mountains and pipelines so your grandchildren can walk along womxn and know her bounty and beauty. I will save the trees so you can breathe and listen to their stories, because I know you hear them whisper to you, and you teach me to hear them too. I will keep my heart and mind open to magic so that I can see what you do. And together we will weave a world that works. A world where nobody goes hungry, so your children won't ask why that person begs for money. A place where you will be respected as a Wet'suwet'en man and the teachings you bring to us, where your strength is measured by how gracefully you give, not by the force of your fist. A world where children are sacred, women are treasured, and men are trusted. We can weave it all together. Some days I will do more than others. Some days you will cry injustice. But know that you are loved. The stars are on your side, and that I will never give up. This I promise you. Awetsa Masai.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm leaving my camera off. That's fine. Your internet betrayed us at the very start of that poem for your son. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind rereading the whole thing if you like, because it's beautiful and I don't mind hearing the end of it again, but we missed at least the first couple of stanzas, and I would love to hear them. Okay, you are still on mute.
Okay. I'll try not to cry this time. My greatest accomplishment is you. I looked in your eyes and was terrified. Clearly, you were too. I recognized the power behind your innocent face, the knowledge you brought down. What could I possibly offer? You taught me that lay it on the line, push until you can't give any more love. Because for the first time, there is someone in the world I would die for. The boy that keeps the spirit world laughing. You are medicine. The one that can see through Sasquatch eyes, the example for future men. You carry the world in your heart, not on your shoulders. And for you, I will do anything. I will move mountains and pipelines so your grandchildren can walk along womxn and know her bounty and beauty. I will save the trees so you can breathe and listen to their stories, because I know you hear them whisper to you, and you teach me to hear them too. I will keep my heart and mind open to magic so that I can see what you do. And together we will weave a world that works. A world where nobody goes hungry, so your children won't ask why that person begs for money. A place where you will be respected as a Wet'suwet'en man and the teachings you bring to us. Where your strength is measured by how gracefully you give, not by the force of your fist. A world where children are sacred, women are treasured, and men are trusted. We can weave it all together. Some days I will do more than others. Some days you will cry injustice. But know that you are loved. The stars are on your side, and that I will never give up. This I promise you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I asked because, wow, the beginning of that poem is beautiful, and to hear it again was a gift. So thank you so much.